Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks all of you for being here. And I just ask your forgiveness for my tardiness. I preside over the Senate Wednesday mornings. I thought it seemed like a good idea when I picked that time. And unfortunately, I missed the first hour of some really good hearings. But thank you all for being here. And I think absent that first hour, I'm just going to throw a couple of things out maybe and facilitate some discussion, if that's okay. You know, I think some of you know, maybe all of you know, that I was a regulator for 10 years in North Dakota on the Public Service Commission, where we had very broad as well as very deep regulatory authority over lots of things, not just economics, but environmental and siting and all of that. And one of the challenges, one of my frustrations with NSR has always been what seems to me to be a perverse incentive away from innovation that would actually be applied especially to existing facilities in the form of modifications that would actually be cleaner, but the incentive is to not do it as per the NSR. And maybe, I'm sure you've discussed some of that, but maybe I would just throw out, along with that frustration, there's got to be some bipartisan, wide-ranging solutions that don't perversely incent the wrong activity, assuming, and I think we can, that we all support cleaner energy development and lowering of emissions, particularly pollutants of all types. Do any of you or all of you have just an idea for us, whether it's the GAINS Act, and I'm going to support the GAINS Act. In fact, I will be a co-sponsor of it, to try and bring clearer definition to terms. But is there something we can be doing together that Senator Carper and I can agree on? Because we tend to agree more often than people might think. What's the middle ground? What are some thoughts that anybody could share with us as to how we might be able to get to the goal that we all share? Is that fair? Sure.
Well, in my testimony, I offered narrow the scope even further to just existing coal-fired generating units, and that is a known universe. It's not going to grow. If they were to add a new unit at that existing plant, it would go through NSR. Sure. And then do not ignore how beneficial the cross-state air pollution rule is. We're talking ancient history when we're talking about tailpipes and downwind states in this thing. Mobile sources are your problem. Marine vessels are your problem in the Northeast. Kentucky, I don't know the air quality phenomenon that allows emissions from Kentucky to leap over West Virginia and then fall down in one concentrated area in Hartford, Maryland. I just don't know how that works. I really think that marine vessels, mobile sources, peak demand generators that are operated on high ozone days, those are the focus, and maybe we should focus in that arena. But as far as narrowing the scope of this legislation, you could do it with existing sources, but do not ignore the great benefits. The cross-state air pollution rule, we talk about allowing areas that are more concentrated in pollutants. Well, the 2017 update narrowed that to states. Those allowances are narrowed to the states. So Kentucky cannot emit more by buying allowances from Georgia or in Indiana or somewhere else. That's old, ancient history.
Mr. Olmsted, I know you're very familiar with the Petronova project, and I think you referenced it in your testimony as well. And that's one that we're fairly familiar with up in North Dakota as well. Is there a way to do this that we could all do?
You raise an interesting point that if we really do want coal-fired power plants to install carbon capture and sequestration, coming up with some way to help them do that without having these regulatory burdens like NSR, I think would be a good thing. And maybe that's an area where we could come up with some sort of an increase, because everybody, I believe, supports that kind of an approach. And I know from the Petronova experience that NSR was a huge impediment. The other thing I would offer, and we talked a little bit about this before you were able to get here, is defining energy efficiency improvements in a way that everybody would be comfortable with. I mean, I just don't know why you would want to have this regulatory hurdle for people who want to improve the efficiency of their facilities. And Sean mentioned an issue that's come up in a number of cases is you can now buy more efficient turbine blades for coal-fired power plants. But if you do, you trigger NSR.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the cost and the expense of triggering NSR, no one wants to go through that. And as a result, you have people passing up these energy efficiency opportunities.
Could you address it? I know my time's running out, but I'd feel incomplete if I didn't hear from you, John.
Well, thank you, Senator Cramer. That's very kind of you. You know, Senator, I don't have a specific idea, but I think most Americans think that there's a pretty simple common sense question that should be answered. Will any reform let plants pollute more after the reform than they did before? And if the answer to that is yes, then maybe we should look for other solutions. We are in agreement that greater efficiency is a good thing, less pollution, less carbon pollution is a good thing. But I think we need to look elsewhere for solutions, since the answers at this hearing are so clear today that this bill will let plants pollute more. So maybe that's just not the solution that we need to try to find the compromise around.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.